You're on, Alex.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is the Astroimaging channel. I'm Alex. And tonight we're going to have a pretty cool show. I think everybody wants to be able to take images automated and have everything work just fine and just wonderfully work and take pictures for us all night. Dave has been pursuing that for quite some time, and Dave Anderson is here to tell us how it's going to happen. Before we go there, though, you know how I usually go into the calendar and stuff like that. I will do that in a minute or three. But Rory is here. Rory Clark has taken over the workshop aspect of what we do in the Astroimaging channel. And Rory wants to tell you a little bit about what we've got planned for working with Eric Cole's data next week. Rory, can you go ahead and broadcast something here and tell people what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Next week, we'll be going over Eric's data. A number of people have sent in their processed images that Eric posted, and I have Rod, Gowrie, John, Wanda, and Linda presenting next week. So they'll be doing about a 5-minute presentation on what they think makes their processing processing technique stand out. And if you send in a photo, I'll also be going over I'll put together a little presentation and present everyone's photos next week as well. That's all. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you very much, Rory. Okay, and I'm going to start sharing now and go into what I usually do here. Thank you, Rory, for taking on that stuff. And Rory's a good example of the kind of volunteers we need. He doesn't just do stuff. He doesn't sit around and ask, well, what should I be doing? He actually figures out what needs to be done and goes ahead and starts doing it. So if we go over to the Astroimaging channel, the thing that we're talking about is what's called a workshop, TAIC workshop. And we've had several of them, and we've had other projects before, and I'll go to them in a minute. But you can still get Eric's data. It's still out there, and we'll try to keep it out there for a while. Eric Cole's M33 data, you can download the data by clicking this link, and you can process the data. Eric does wonderful work. He's a great processor, but he's also got wonderful equipment sitting out in a remote observatory far away in the slopes of the Sierras. So he can really take some really decent, he really gathers data well. And a lot of people, if you want something to practice on, click on that link and go. And as Rory just said, if you go ahead and submit a picture, he'll still try to get it in, but try to get it in early because the guy's going to be working on it this week. There's another thing that we do called tech shots, and the shots are where we these are some movies that you've already seen. Arno down in Australia is another one of those volunteers. He volunteered to pitch in and kind of coordinate all that. So what he's done is he's been collecting up until October 31st. He collected your shots of nebula, and he's putting them together into a movie. And we got the sneak preview tonight, so we know that it's a really good show. And that's going to be coming up. That's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. So next week, tonight, we've got Dave telling us about the evolution of an addiction. And no, it's not about the OxyContin thing. It's not that. It's about how he's built himself an observatory. He'll get to that in a minute or three. Next week, we've got what Rory just talked about. And the week after that, we've got a 3-part show. The Nebula movie is going to take 10, 15 minutes and explaining where it came from, all that other stuff. So that's about a third of the show. And then Eric is going to tell us how to do GIF and animations out of the pictures that he's made and things like that. And then I'm going to do something that we've been thinking about doing for a while, a short segment, just 15, I think it's 17 minutes long, that is very specific to one particular skill. And we're thinking that if we could have a number of those out there, like tutorials about how to do one little thing, rather than have to watch a whole show and pick out the parts that are, the lessons. we're going to break the lessons down into smaller parts and offer them as a whole set of instructional material. Now we've got other people coming in for a while, and then we take off for our holidays. We've got some more. We've got a couple of open days. We've got two left, one left in January, and we've got a couple of people nibbling, like they might take one of those or not. But we always need presenters. So hit the contact button up here. Tell us who you are, what you'd like to present. You don't have to know everything about what you're presenting, as long as you tell people that, hey, I just want to share with you what I got. I don't know everything maybe, but I've got something I can share with you. And we figure if you're smart enough to take an astro image, you're probably smart enough to figure out how to use a PowerPoint or run a program or something like that and show us how you're doing it. And I did want to show you under links. These are some of the previous workshops that we've done. The jellyfish data, the NGC 7000, the wall, my M13, and Eric Cole's M42 data. That data is still out there. And if you enjoy working with really pretty good data, particularly Eric's and some of the other data, hey, jump in and you can still do some of those things. That's in our links area of our website. Okay, let's get back to me. Stop sharing. Don't forget. Oh, before we do that, don't forget to. Oh, hang on. Freaked me out. I heard somebody talking, and it was me when I switched over to the YouTube. Anyway, don't forget to ask your questions over here. We're gonna. Dave is one of those people that says, "Yeah, go ahead and interrupt me if it's an appropriate question." So we'll be asking Dave some questions as you ask them to us, and you can type your comments down here. I want to tell you something. We don't do a good job of reading these comments afterwards, so you can comment down here if you want. But Deborah was real good on reading the comments last week and answered a few of them. But in general, if you want to make a comment about something that we're saying, hey, just put it right over here in the comment section. And for those of you who can't stay up on a Sunday night, you're in Europe or something like that, and you see them later, yeah, put your comments in over there. There's all sorts of other things to do on the website. So while we're here, anyway, let's get back to Dave. And Dave, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And could you tell people who you are and what it is that you'd like to tell them about your addiction?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll go ahead and share my screen now then. Right, here we go. And I will, whoops. Computers, allow, and here goes nothing. You tell me if it looks right.
We're seeing your full screen. Now we're seeing your PowerPoint or whatever presentation. Okay. There you're showing it. Okay, you're live. You're doing what you need to do.
All right. Now I'm glad to hear Alex say that I don't need to know everything, because I really don't. This is kind of a way of telling the story of how I ended up pursuing the universe and kind of almost a life story. So a little bit about my background. This is how it got started for me as a kid. This actual book here called You Will Go to the Moon. And I don't know how old I was. I was probably 6 years old or so when I was reading this book. And I figured that was true, so much to the point that I secretly had the desire to be an astronaut. Now, back then, you would not say that out loud because people think you were crazy. I mean, that would be like saying, I want to be the president of the United States. It's not going to happen. But I did go through my whole school years secretly thinking, this is what I'm going to do. I was drawn to it. And I grew up during the space program and saw that happening live. I went through my younger years and I ended up, my freshman year anyway, at Cornell University. And I took a class, 2 classes, Astronomy 101 and 102. That was planetary astronomy and stellar astronomy. And we had a class of about 25 students in there. And in both of those classes, on one of the lectures, in walks this man, Carl Sagan, to give a guest lecture to us lowly students. I found this picture. It's a screenshot of a video of him giving a talk in about the same time, because he came in to the planetary astronomy class with that model of the Viking lander. This was before we landed on Mars. And the amazing thing about that is we didn't know anything about anything back then. It was absolutely amazing. Back then they just had artist renditions of what the moons of Jupiter would look like. And then when I left Cornell, I did one thing, which was to go to that observatory right there on the campus. And it was my first chance to look through a telescope, and I saw two things. One was a cluster of galaxies, and the other one was Saturn. And that just did it for me. I was done, because I think everybody must know what that's like to see Saturn for the first time. But my reaction was, that thing is that's for real. Everything I'd ever seen was a picture of it. So when I finished college, I interviewed for a job at various places. I got my degree in aerospace engineering. And this is a statement for anybody that happens to be young and have somebody tell you you can't do that. For the first time, this was in '79, a long time had been since NASA interviewed for engineers. And they said to the class I was in, don't bother showing up unless you're a straight A student. I was a high B, low A student, so that's all I needed to hear. I signed up, interviewed with this man named John Bull, and he hired me. And I worked for 3.5 years at NASA Ames Research Center. And I didn't even know until I got there that he was in the 5th group of Apollo astronauts. That's him in the orange suit next to Fred Hayes in their survival training. And he became, you'll understand later in my story, but he became a hero to me. And when I was out flying around our local airport, one day I heard him on the radio, and he was flying in with his instructor into Minden Airport, and he was with an instructor. I think he was 73 at the time. And so that in the lower right picture there is me standing next to John Bull. And that was about 3 months before he passed away. He was medically grounded from the space program. He was lining up to make one of the moon landings. And the lower right picture also shows why I was never going to be an astronaut, because you had to be less than 6 feet tall. And that's why, to me, he was 10 feet tall. But I wasn't 6 feet tall. Anyway, after that, when I was working at NASA, I worked with Sierra Nevada Corporation when it was a group of 4 employees, which has obviously changed a lot since then. The CEO, the owner or whatever of Sierra Nevada was one of those 4 people that I worked with. We worked with a project in aircraft guidance and navigation, and that came into play. I worked with them as a consulting engineer later on in my career. And then I left the government cushy job and went to work for Bill Lear's last project, which is called the Lear fan. And it was a twin engine turboprop with a single propeller in the back. And that's me in the yellow there, back when I was a little bit younger than I am right now. And then that company folded, and that led me to my career, trying to get closer to the stars than being the astronaut. I figured I can't do that. So I ended up starting a 36-year career with the United Airlines. And I ended up finally flying this captain on the 777 there. But this was going to be a story to tell with this talk, but it's going to be a little bit shorter because I spent 4 years fighting with the FFAA. I always add an extra F for reasons I'll let you all figure out what that stands for. I had an accidental fall, breaking a bunch of ribs and whatnot, and they said, oh, by the way, you had a head injury. I never had a symptom or whatever, and ended up being told that I'd have to wait 5 years in order to return to flying. And I was going to talk about that, but 2 weeks ago, I got the letter that I'm going to say, one, I'm back. I've got a physical now, so I can fly again. But I'm forced to retire due to age. But I'm going to be able to fly anyway. During my career as an airline pilot, I started to revive my interest in astronomy, and this is what you can see here is basically my first telescope, and I learned all the lessons about convenience and whatnot. I had this thing which was very awkward to pull out of the garage every time I wanted to use it, and I really didn't know anything about I guess this is an equatorial mount. It's got a little clock drive in it. It's not sophisticated at all. It's a Meade 10-inch Newtonian, but it was difficult to find things. I found the Ring Nebula once, which was a big thrill and that was done by just hunting in the sky looking for it. But that did started up the interest. That was back in the 90s. And then I think this was probably now about 10 years ago. Through my wife, I met this man named Lee Snyder, who was an astronomer, an amateur astronomer, but he had gotten into research. And oddly enough, on the internet, just while I was presenting this or preparing for this little talk here, I came across this website here, which is Society for Astronomical Sciences. And there's Lee right there in blue with the blue hat. And he was an absolute enthusiastic amateur astronomer. He didn't do much photography anymore, but he was mainly in his backyard in Carson City, Nevada, doing research, doing binary star data collection overnight. And unfortunately, he came down with cancer, and that lasted about 5 years. And when he knew he was getting to the end, he wanted to see that his telescope equipment went to somebody that was going to use it, not ended up in somebody's garage. So that's what I'll say is the birth of LSO, or Lee Snyder Observatory. And it started out with that mount there, the Meade equatorial, or the wedge there for the fork-mounted LX 200 12-inch telescope, which he gave me. I'll say I inherited it because he did pass away. So I brought it back to my house and decided, well, as long as I've got it here, I got to do something with it. I might as well dig a hole in the ground. So for me, virtually all my astronomy projects start with this, a hole in the ground. So we own 4 acres east of Lake Tahoe, and the Bortles rating is 4. I think it's probably more like 4.5 looking towards Reno and 3.5 looking towards the south, because it gets rapidly darker the further south you go. But Lee helped me pick out a spot, and I dug a hole in the ground, poured some concrete, and mounted his telescope, which used to be in his backyard, that pier, the wedge, the fork mount, the telescope. And so I figured, well, as long as I've done that, I might as well build a floor, and maybe I'll build some walls, which, as you can see in these photographs, is how it evolved. I did learn one big lesson when I did this, because I naively thought I should put the mount right smack in the middle of the building. But because of the geometry of a fork mount, you can't really do that. I mean, the pivot point needs to be in the middle of the observatory, but I didn't know that. And I went out and purchased an Explorer Dome. This is an 8-foot Explorer Dome, which I basically got the drawings and the dimensions and everything before I built the structure that houses it. But I'm going to try something here. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I don't think any sound goes through in here. But this was getting the thing together with the rotating ring and the drive gear and everything, which I had pre-installed when I purchased it. everything went together great. And then at the very last minute, while I was flying over to Europe during those times. I was in Europe, and we had what would be the storm of the century where I live, and they clocked 130-mile-an-hour winds, and they were strong enough to blow down the three-rail horse fence, like about 100 feet of that horse fence. And at that point, the dome was on the telescope. I mean, it was on the building, and there's a retaining ring that prevents it from lifting up. And to my horror, I'm watching this from Europe over 8 time zones, and the power went out, and my wife ended up being the hero because the shutter of the observatory or the dome blew off and was banging in the wind. That's a picture of the retaining ring that should have been in there. The dome did not budge, it stayed where it was. But while this wind was blowing, that thing was attached to the rope that used to open it, and it was banging on the ground so hard I was sure I was going to need to at least replace that door. And when I got home, the only thing I needed to do was wipe it off. The wind was blowing so hard in the dirt, and then followed by rain, that I pulled out in my unfinished building there a 5-gallon bucket full of mud. The telescope was covered with plastic and rope, and yet you can see how dirty it got. The hand controller actually got dirt inside the display, and yet the dome survived beautifully. That thing is built like a Sherman tank. And so I finished the dome. At that point, you think I'd be done. Right before Lee passed away, about a week before he died, we got him out there uh, in his wheelchair with his family, and there he was right to the end talking to them about the telescope and the technology. He was an absolute enthusiast for astronomy. So for me, in my early imaging, one of the things he gave me was an SBIG monochrome camera, of which I knew nothing about. I was so naive that I could not figure out how you could take a picture with a telescope without an eyepiece, because I looked through an eyepiece and I used my iPhone. I got the Mercury transit there on the right side of that screen. And how do you get a picture without an eyepiece? Well, obviously everybody knows that, but I didn't. Those 2 pictures on the right on the left are from that SBIG camera. I didn't know about the monochrome filters, the RGB filters inside the camera, but it was pretty inspiring for me to actually see there's a real galaxy. There it is, the famous world. Not a very good picture though. And as it turns out, the LX200 was a classic, and it had issues. That's the mechanism there of it, and it's, for its time, I think it's pretty good mount, but I tried to do everything I could to make things perform better, and I bought the classic telescope upgrade with a new handset and whatnot, and it works, but it didn't perform as it would. So I visited a friend who lives at the Chiefland Astronomy Village in Florida, and they've got a bunch of people with incredible setups there for multiple observatories and whatnot. And the advice I was given is the mount is like the heart of the system. You got to have a good mount. So I decided it was time to get rid of the old fork mount and try to improve things. This is an illustration of a horrible solution to a problem of the mount, or the mount not being high enough in the dome. This is a thing that evolved over time into this, as my final idea was to elevate the dome or the mount by placing it on a pier that I dug into the ground, or that I added on to the previous pier. And I only did that because I got a quote for how much they wanted to build an actual pier that would be that tall. But as it turns out, that worked out just fine and dandy. While that was going on, of course, I couldn't stop with this addiction. So that led to the have telescopal travel concept. And I just, went through 2 mounts. I actually bought a Meade mount, a small mount, but it was totally unsatisfactory, and it would act on its own and would start slewing towards the ground, doing weird things. So I ended up with a CEM 25P, which would go well with the CEM 60 that's in the big dome, and then purchased a William Optics GT71. And at that time, I was using the DSLR camera, testing it out in the backyard at our home, which is about 300 feet away from the dome. As a grounded pilot, the last 4 years up until just now, I could still fly gliders. This is landing at the Blue Wing Flats, which is out near Lovelock, Nevada. And that's a Bortle 1 location. And you can drive there because you'll see tire tracks out there, but it's about a 45-minute flight from our airport. And we would land there and camp in that amazingly dark skies. And everybody knows about dark skies, but this is just, it blew me away what I was able to do. And it's probably a big turning point in the whole imaging business for astrophotography. Load everything up in that. That's an airplane with long wings, otherwise known as a glider. According to FAA rules, you can fly it without a medical. And the good news is you can just barely kill yourself in it. We'd always fly out there with at least 2 airplanes, so that safety in numbers, if something broke down or something, you wouldn't be out in the middle of nowhere for no reason. And I also have we're living near the Sierra Nevadas, so I've got a dark sky location that turns out to have an unbelievable amount of mosquitoes. I found that night. And there's a pass called Monitor Pass to the east of the Sierras that you can get up to 8,500 feet. Another, I think that's Bortle 2 skies, but you're at 8,500 feet. So I have a van that I used to use as my commuter van with a mattress in there and the battery, and just set everything up and get it all on operating with the ASI Air Pro. And now also that's an RC6, which is also part of the addiction. It was $400 at the time. Now they want $500 for it, thanks to inflation. But I wanted to have a couple focal lengths for a remote observatory, or type, I'm not remote observatory, but remote observing or photographing. And that'll run all night while I sleep in the van, starting it up about every hour and a half to warm it back up again. Well, the Meade LX200 is a good telescope, but it doesn't have the optics of an Edge HD. So in the advice of a lot of astronomy people I know, I ended up investing in this, which was the next phase of the addiction, which retired the LX200. It's 9.25 Edge HD with the focal reducer. And that became the setup in the Lee Snyder Observatory inside the dome, with the LX or the Edge HD on the CEM 60 mount on the elevated mount. And if you're seeing me, you're seeing a picture of the organic dome rotation device, because I used to sleep out there and get up every 45 minutes and move the dome, which got old very fast. A quick parlay into a bigger refractor telescope. You gotta keep the addiction going, and all these companies out there are the pushers. So I decided to invest in this 127 ED Explore Scientific, which has been very good. It fits beautifully inside the dome. Now, I've on this particular one, and I'm watching the time here, so I don't go over too much here. But the word connection is in red, bold, capital letters, because the frustration of operating this thing from inside the house, which is the goal to not freeze to death out there in the winter, especially, is to rotate the dome, open and close everything. And so, because of the price of what they want for Explore Dome, I ended up buying a Next Dome rotation kit, which comes with that glue-on gearing track and gear wheel and whatnot. But in the right picture, there is a drive gear for the Explorer Dome. So the idea was to make that thing work. And you can see on the right side of this one, work with that dome. Now this has been about a year I've been working on this thing and getting it to the point where it's reliably turning and not getting stuck and whatnot. In the process of putting it on there, I noticed this fidget stepper motor. I've never even heard of a stepper motor before. So I started looking into this, and that stepper motor there is a $75 roughly. And through a Sierra Nevada engineer friend of mine, who was one of the original 4 employees there back in the 80s, he helped me not break into, but modify the driver so that the gear ratios and everything were set for the Explorer Dome with this different gear ratio, and it actually worked. But I bought that motor figuring, I wonder if I can make that motor operate the shutter, and I can. And as a matter of fact, the the gear that came for the next dome works. I thought I could do what you see in the left side of this display here, or this page. See if I turned that motor, if it would open and close the shutter, and it does. And then to open and close the lower shutter, I ended up buying 2 cheaper linear actuators that are dumb. Voltage in one way makes them move out, the other way makes them move in, and they automatically shut down. And everything is controlled through this fidget system. So on the upper left there, you can see my incredibly professional wiring installation of this system. But it consists of a 12-volt deep cycle 35 amp hour battery, and then a solar charger that's on the outside of the dome to keep that charged up. And then Fidget has what they call a Vent hub. It's a Wi-Fi wireless hub, and that connects wirelessly to the computer out there, which is a mini PC. And then you have a stepper motor control, a DC motor control, and all these things are relatively inexpensive. Like the hub, I think was $70, and I added a position sensor, which is it's just going to tell me when the door is closed, the lower door is closed. A temperature, humidity sensor, a voltage sensor, and they're like $10 or $20 each. So anyway, that's what I've got: temperature, humidity, battery voltage, stepper motor control, and all that stuff. And then I ended up adding a 12 to 24 volt converter, because the stepper motor likes to run on 12 on that. But I wasn't done with addiction yet. This is now the evolution of what my wife likes to call Dave's doghouse. So I decided to run everything from out there. So there's my portable tripod sitting out there. I thought, well, I might as well make it more solid than a tripod. So there's a pier in the ground, concrete, and it goes the way of the dome. I might as well build a floor. And then, now I'm not going to put in another dome, but by then, when I bought the dome, I didn't even know about roll-off roof. So this is basically a miniature version of a roll-off roof observatory. It's not designed for me to be in there. I can crawl around in there, but it's small and it's in the shadow of a road that headlights can get on this where it is. So it's hiding over there. That's why it's so close to the observatory. And it works via the miracle of rollerblade wheels. And this should be a video of just, when it was under construction, just testing it. Now I know, a lot of people are using these channels and things like that. So I decided to use the rollerblade wheels to see how it works. I may end up having to put a metal plate on top of the 4x4 that you can see there in the upper left, because it looks like it's kind of making a groove in there. But I bought a simple belt drive garage door opener to operate the roof. Everything's a technical problem. You find out that seems like a good idea, and then you find out you can control it through Wi-Fi. So from anywhere in the world, if I can get Wi-Fi, I can open and close the door. But the problem is that it's meant to open close a garage door, and they have a sensor that goes on the garage door. So I ended up having to design this thing in the lower part, which is a little way of tricking that thing to telling it the door is closed, like it would if it were a garage door. And as it turns out, that whole system wasn't reliable enough. So I've ended up using a relay and something I'm going to talk about in a second. You can see some bungee cords in there because this thing, the Safety for All garage door opener, thinks it's hit something, so it wouldn't start up. I could give it a little nudge and it would go. So I have these pre-loaded bungee cords, so when it's closed or open, when it starts moving, and that's how that works. But it's finally all the bugs are resolved, and I say right because the bugs are never all resolved. There we go with connection again. The biggest frustration for me, not being a computer expert, and I have a real good friend who went to Cornell when I was there, and he ended up being a software engineer, and he gets so frustrated. He's an astronomer, but he gets so frustrated with the computers, he just wants to walk away from it all. But what I've got here is Ethernet switch out there, and I ran a 250-foot Ethernet cable from our house out to the observatory. I tried wireless connections and all that, but there's nothing like a wire. So there's a local Wi-Fi router out there of multiple power strips. And then I ran across this thing. Now, this is the poor man's version of the astronomy power control business, but these little smart plugs. And then I also say Aladdin Connect. You can forget that now because I'm not using that anymore, but I still open it and close it with one of these GoSun things that operates a relay. They're only about $7 each, and they're really reliable. I wouldn't say 100%, but they're really reliable. And I think I have about 20 of them out there now, controlling just about everything I can think of. So this is the net result. The CEM60 was transplanted out there, and I had to modify the roof a little bit to make sure I clear everything. And I believe, I haven't tried it yet, but I believe I can get the LX200 on there. And then these cameras. I know my time is getting short here. But what the big thing for me, and I'll zip through these pretty quickly here. What happened to me was I saw an ad or something about the PlaneWave telescopes, and I looked at that and I went, boy, and I looked at how much they cost, and I said, oh, of course, wouldn't that be great? But I can't afford that. And then I started asking myself, why did I work all those years? I'm now forced into retirement. Why have I driven the same car for 20 years? So this PlaneWave system is a direct drive, silent. It moves at 50 degrees a second. It's a 200-pound capacity, high resolution encoders, has no backlash, no periodic error, no meridian flip, and it can mount 2 telescopes. The whole thing weighs 200. So I decided, I haven't bought a new car in 20 years. I'm going to not buy a new car. I'll keep working on the old one and buy another car, but it will be a telescope instead. So about 50 calculations to make sure that this thing was going to fit, because it's set in concrete. And I'll zip through these pretty fast, but it was nerve-wracking because it involves 2,800 pounds of concrete. Where is north? How far do I need it to be back so it's going to clear everything within the observatory? So that on the picture on the left there is the mount, the stainless steel J bolts that are in the concrete waiting for this thing, that they should be perfectly located with string plumb bobs and whatnot. There's a guy over in California that built this pier, which was incredible. It fit like it was made for it, and it was. The guy builds them for them. So they deliver this thing. It took probably 3 months to get it, but they do not mess around. And I think I made a fortune because they make this thing out of wood. And if anybody's ever priced the wood these days, you'll find out quickly that that's a lot of money in those boxes. So there's the wedge, which weighs, well, That's like 150 pounds. So between the pier and the wedge, I've got 315 pounds and 2,800 pounds of concrete. The mount itself weighs 275 pounds. This was very nerve-wracking because until this thing actually went in place, I wasn't sure if it was going to clear everything inside the dome. And that's the mount installed with the help of a lot of friends. The old pier is still in there because I'm not going to tear it out, and it makes kind of a nice little table and it clears everything. And then the decision was, do you want to do a 17 or 14-inch PlaneWave? There's a lot of money difference there, but again, it's like computers. I never said, boy, I wish I had less memory. And, you know, I've never regretted it. The zero buyer's remorse. This thing is unbelievably amazing. So there it is installed. And then I added that 127 ED, the refractor on the other side of it. And then, so where I'm sitting right now is where you see right here. This is mission control. I actually have two computers here. One's not on right now, but I can monitor the telescope through one of these little webcams that's connected to the local Wi-Fi out there. And this picture is actually in tuning of the mount. And I took that picture out because it's just about the sound of the mount. And just a quick segue, here's the fires we had this summer, and that picture on the lower left was taken at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was not through a red lens. Anyway, after tuning the mount and telling the telescope to point to a star, which whatever this one is, the pointing accuracy just is staggering to me after learning how to do polar alignment and you know, multiple star alignment of the telescope and tweaking this and that. This thing, when you say I want to look at Jupiter, it goes to it. And I've had the image on the full frame camera down to 320 by 240. I forget to reset that so I can see the big picture. And when I say go to Jupiter, there it is, right in the middle of that 320 by 240 frame. It's incredible. Another one of the technical issues was dealing with dome synchronization. I'm using Nina to run my system, and they didn't really have anything to deal with. This is an L mount, but it's basically a fork mount. But after a couple of weeks of working with someone who I never actually spoke to, it was all done on the computer. It now is a work of art. It just follows that telescope. And there's not a lot of margin there, if you can see in this photograph. Anyway, so connection is the big deal. Even in the last 3 months or so, I'm still dealing with connection issues. I found some problems, but now it's to the point now where I can sit down here. If we got nice clear skies, I can get everything programmed on Nina, sequence whatever I need to do, and use their advanced sequencer, tell it to go, and then go to sleep. Imagine that. And then, of course, I wake up every couple hours and come in and take a look at it, make sure it's all good. Nina has a plug-in now called Ground Station, which will alert your iPhone or your phone or anything really if it detects an error, you know, an error like a connection problem or something like that. And so I'm continuing to evolve this addiction today. Right now, I'm working on a connection issue with not a connection issue, but a tracking issue with the L mount, the L500 mount. And it's a work in progress. Right now, it's actually testing. I could show that, but I won't take the time to do that. But it's been running since noon now and hasn't skipped a beat yet. So hopefully I've resolved that one. I bought a flat LED panel, and as the picture in the lower, well, actually they're both a picture of that. It's a way for me to shoot flats inside. I ended up having to buy some window tint for your car. It's way too bright for that telescope, but it works now. I got it set up to do that. Okay, I'm at yeah. Okay, so I'm just about done here. I thought I'd throw in just a few pictures. I'm learning, you know, half the battle is getting the data, and half the battle is processing the data. And processing the data is still really a work in progress of Pixin site and all that stuff. But this was something that I took early on, and now this is something taken with narrowband through the CDK17. By the way, the 20 would not fit in the dome, otherwise I probably would have done that too. That's an earlier picture I got with probably the CEM60 and the Celestron 9.25 of M27. And this is now with, this is LRGB of M27. I think this is through the PlaneWave. And this is a narrowband showing some of the outer nebulosity there. Planetary through the CDK17 is working spectacular for me. I mean, I don't have very often the perfect scene conditions to get the kind of resolution I would like to see, but it's working pretty well. The other amazing thing about this L500 mount is that it moves like at lightning speed, and I was concerned because it'll track a satellite going over. And I was concerned that the mount or the dome would not keep up with the mount slewing, and it does. About every 3 seconds, the dome will shift and keep it centered, right? But this is my first try at shooting the International Space Station. For some reason, it's not in the center, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. But there may be a way to fix that, but it's not a big deal. But that's a flyover taken with multiple single exposures. That's just one exposure, of course, as it flies by. Not transiting the moon or anything, which is what I've done in the past. It's just here it comes, and the mount follows it. There's a good old M33 through the CDK. That's an LRGB. I was going to add hydrogen data, but the red came through really well in that photo. And then narrowband imaging is amazing to me. This, I think, is the Pelican. It's this IC5070, I believe, narrowband. This is something I was working on last night with this tracking issue, but and then still the William Optics will give me a shot like that from the Blue Wing Flats out there in the desert. Another one, which is, then I'm starting to work on multiple night imaging. So I think this is 3 nights worth of imaging of the Ghost Nebula. Can't remember what this one was called. A friend of mine sent me a link or something about this. They're supposed to be like 300 million light years away, which is unbelievable.
That's the rose.
Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah, it just and this is an example of the tracking of, or the pointing accuracy of that thing, because I don't do anything to nudge it or anything. I just start shooting, and there it is every single time. It actually makes me lazy. You can see there's a little phantom galaxy up there above that too. So that's it for me. My little story. I started from encouragements from friends. I started a Facebook page I call Contemplating the Universe, and that's the information right there. Anybody's welcome to come. It's just my journey of trying to get better. And at this point now, so one of the things I do in my spare time for the last 20 years or so is acting. And I remember an interview with a very famous actor whose name's escaping me right now. Brian Dennehy was on a play with Christopher Plummer in New York, and Brian Dennehy's been acting for 50 years, and he was talking about how incredibly amazing it was, how much he was learning from working with Christopher Plummer. And I'm thinking, what you've been doing? Haven't you learned everything by now? And that's the beauty of astronomy, is that if you think you know everything, you definitely don't. So I'm constantly learning. Sometimes it's about electronics, which I'd rather not learn, but especially the processing side of it, it's just a never-ending learning process. And that's it. So I think I did okay on time.
Yeah, it's actually, that's a great picture at the end, Dave. Love that.
Yeah, that was just the other day when we actually finally got some rain around here. This is such an addiction that it's actually, sometimes it's a relief when the clouds roll in, because then I know I'm not I can kind of take the night off and not be doing this. Even though it's remote, I still have to make sure everything goes correctly. It's getting way more reliable now than it used to be.
You just can't pass up a clear night, can you? When it's
I
there, you
can't, and
won't.
it used to be for flying. I would look up and go, "This would be a great day to be flying." And now I have a new standard, which you'll see the high cirrus clouds and go, "That's a great day to go flying." But in astronomy, it's damn. Look at those cirrus clouds. That's too bad.
We all know that. Let me ask you a question, which maybe we could save till later, but I'm curious. So you built your observatory, and then you're putting in bigger and bigger telescopes. So have you ever thought about, my God, I wish this building was a little bit bigger?
Yeah, if I had to do it over again, I had no idea where this was going to go. That PlaneWave thing, I have a file called the PlaneWave decision. It's just like what, and actually a really good friend of mine that was my office mate at NASA suddenly passed away like instantaneously at his house about 6 months ago, and that was right about when I was going to make this decision. I thought, what, life is too short. I'm going to do this. But if I had known, if I bought the 11-foot Explorer Dome, then the L500 would mount the CDK20, and I probably have done that. I saw one on Astromart for sale, a used one. But literally, I didn't mention this, but there you got about that much clearance inside that dome. It's about 3 inches, which either means I'm lucky or I'm a good calculator, because there was nothing to spare, but it works. As long as it doesn't hit anything, it's good. I did have to adjust my linear actuators on the lower door a little bit because they're uncomfortably too close to the telescope. But
those of us that are a little bit older and doing astrophotographer, when my wife asked me, do you need this thing, whatever this thing is? And I always say, well, what are we waiting for?
right. Well, I'm lucky because my wife has this sign that she's got on the refrigerator that says, "Life is short. Buy the damn blank."
You should put that on a shirt.
Yeah, somebody probably does, but it's it's true. It's like you get into, if you're younger and you're talking about you're saving for retirement now, and then I'm forced to be retired now, though I may still find a flying job now I got my medical certificate back. But it's you have to change your mode from save to now I got to spend it, and my goal is to have the last check to the nursing home bounce.
Actually, there was a question earlier. We kind of let it ride. I see the deep cycle battery is sitting on the dome inside. It rotates with the dome. Is there any weight imbalance which causes bindings when it rotates?
No. It rides on not that I can detect. Let's put it that way. The only problem I have with the dome rotation was, I'm not going to say it's because they did it, but there was one spot where the 2 ring things came together, and every time it would hit that spot at 67 degrees, it would either pass through it with a clunking sound, or it would stop there and start going clunk, 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 and then the stepper motor would get off and everything. I ended up replacing that whole ring gear, and now it's to the point where I almost don't even think about the dome. My friend who's the engineer is going to help me, because now I got to learn how to program computers. I need to write software to open and close both the roof and the shutter. I use the fidget control panel software to kind of backdoor make everything work, and but ideally it's going to be something that Nina can call up an external script and just open it. That's why I bought a probe to sense what the lower door is doing, because the sequence is upper door open, lower door open. To close, it's lower door close, upper door close. So if the lower door is not closed, it's not the end of the world, actually. I mean, nothing's going to happen. It's a stepper motor. It'll stop within a 1/16 of an inch of where it's supposed to stop. But it can be written into the software where it can say, if this sensor says is true or whatever, then close the upper door.
What kind of camera? I think you said it, but I missed it.
The camera for which, the telescope or for?
Yeah, for the one you have on the PlaneWave now.
I have the ASI 6200 mm monochrome with the seven position filter wheel, and it's pretty much going to be. I've used it on other telescopes while I was waiting for the PlaneWave, but it's going to live on that telescope. I think I'm not going to take it off. And I use it for the planetary, works pretty darn well, because
So
can,
you use different software like fire capture for planetary?
right now I've been using SharpCap for planetary because it works well, and it allows me to move. And the other ones probably do it. I just know that I can move the region of interest to center it on the planet, and then get rid of the entire big full frame and just focus on that 320 by 240. That's all I need to image it. That's why I was saying when I came out the next day, I didn't reset that, and it went right back to that spot. And there it was, right where it was the night before. The pointing, I did like an 80 point model of the final model thing that I did for that. And
so you're doing lucky imaging with SharpCap and then DSO imaging with the 6200.
Right.
Hey.
And then, I have the three cameras are the 6200, and then I have the 071 MC, the one-shot color. And then before I realized what sensor size meant, I bought the 183 MC Pro, which has got really small pixels. I mean, I'm thinking, oh, small pixels, that's got to be great. And it's a nice camera. It's just, and I'm working on it right now. It's got horrible amp glow. I'm able to deal with it with the Pixent sight, and the calibration and all that, but it's pretty amazing. It looks like somebody's shining a flashlight on one side of the camera.
Dave, I want to interrupt you here. Two things. One is, if you're finished presenting, you can stop screen sharing, and then we'll be able to see you as you talk. And
I want to do that.
And the other thing is, I think we had a question, and I've been communicating with somebody, I don't know, David or Bill or somebody out there. Look, guys, if you've got a show that you'd like to do, just get on the contact page and go ahead and volunteer to do it. We do need presenters. But in doing that, I may have missed. Eric, did you ask Anok's question? Anok John said,
Yes.
yeah, you asked that about the battery?
Okay. That's the only question I saw. There were commentaries, but that's the only actual question. But if I missed something, remind me. But I have another comment for Bill or for Dave. Did anyone in PlaneWave suggest you use an offset pier? I don't know whether you could fit it in your dome, but
I did. That is offset because it
is. So the center of gravity of the whole.
They have a whole calculation on what that offset needs to be, so that the telescope sits in the proper position. I was off, I think, on north by about a half a degree, and you can adjust your way out of that. And that was the other thing I was worried about, is the way I got north was, this is crazy, but I had a good north on the previous the CEM60, so I got it back to facing north, and then I just eyeballed it and marked it on the building.
So what was the RMS of your model? Do you remember? I saw it up on the screen. I couldn't really read.
Oh, well, right now the RMS, what's running right now, testing is still working right. I hope I fixed it. It's 0.04 and 0.07 RMS for RA and DEC. And that's just tracking. And I don't guide. I'm not guiding. They said you don't have to guide, and I'm skeptical, but I know I've done like 15-minute exposure, and I don't see.
Do you have a guide camera?
I have a guide. I do guiding on my other setups with the 290 monochrome, and I've actually got an off-axis guider on the PlaneWave because I need that space. And if I want to, I could guide, but at this point, I'm not doing it. It's I'm not selling their product, but it blows me away. Everything they say about it, I'm finding to be true, not an exaggeration either. It's just that pointing
Well,
thing blew me away when
I basically have the same setup, except I have the 20-inch, and we're just setting it up now. So
yeah, the 20-inch will work on that mount, and that was an option, except the dome wouldn't fit. So like I said, I mean, now, because I'm not going to live forever, so if you do the math, the difference in cost between 17 and the 20, there's a lot of money. But if I live another 20 years, it's not that much per year, blah blah blah. That's what an engineer would do, analyze how much something costs. So
we need a T-shirt saying, "What are we waiting for?"
right. Well, that's that's what I caught myself going. I said, "Oh, I obviously, other people can do that, but I can't do that. I mean, that's ridiculous." And I went, "Wait a minute, what? Why can't I do that?" Somebody drives up in a Lexus that they just bought. People go, "Wow, look at that, a Lexus! Wow, that's great." Well, maybe it was a $60,000 car, and it's going to depreciate 75% of its value in 5 years. So you're buying basically a car. That's the amount of money it takes to get the PlaneWave. And I know for sure if I decided to sell it, it wouldn't be 1/4 its value. They hold their value real well. It's like airplanes are actually.
Actually, they just raised the price of the 20, $5,000. So
yes,
I'm
and
sure
I
the
saw that.
17
That was
as
the
well.
other rationalization for doing that was that we are living in a new thing that we haven't seen since the late 70s, and unfortunately I got to live through that, and it's called inflation. Most people alive now don't even know what that is, and I'm thinking, why don't I just buy this now before the prices go up? And they did. They went up 15%.
One more comment, Alex. I think without knowing more about your setup and how it's performing, it would probably benefit from guiding.
Well, I'm gonna try that. Right now, the problem I'm having, and I'm working with them on this, is that it has those numbers of tracking, and then when I was talking to my engineer friend on the phone about this very thing, I saw it happen because there's a graph and you can watch it. It's 10 seconds long in 1 second increments. And I would guess it happened so fast I didn't have time to take a picture of it, but I would guess that it happened in 1/10 of a second. It went from 0.05 to 0.35. And then as the night went on, it got worse and worse. It got up to almost 1 arc second. And the thing I know that's real is I look at the images and go, yeah, I can see that in the images. It's in one axis, so the stars would kind of elongate in that one axis. So once I get that resolved, I will eventually see what happens when you do the guiding. I'm assuming PhD 2 would do that.
Eric, there was a question came in during that. Steve Z wants to know, on the picture of one of the early portable systems, you had some 3-wheel dollies for your tripod.
Yeah.
Tell us about those.
That, I get those at Harbor Freight. And that's just to make it easier to roll the thing around on the driveway. That's right now I'm setting up to put that into my van. Figure out how to get it in there so I can just lift the whole thing out of the van and set it on the ground and not have to do a whole lot of setup. I also think I threw my back out then I did. Actually, I did. My back was out, so I was rolling.
Do the people at PlaneWave make you sign some kind of agreement that you will not use Harbor Freight tools on your...
No, they don't. They have been very responsive. When I call them, I know the guy by name. It's not because I'm having a lot of problems, but a lot of times people will buy the system, then they'll have one of their people come out and do the setup. And I'm a hopeless do-it-yourselfer, so
yeah,
I end up doing it all myself. But I got to get on the phone and ask them some questions.
And do-it-yourselfers are not particularly good at spending money.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing, and but of course there's a I don't think of the right term for this. It's a paradox about you go to save money by doing it this way, but you end up spending more money because it doesn't work, and then you got to buy this and you got to buy that. I mean, I just
So
ended up I learned a lesson. If anybody uses a garage door opener, I obviously you don't want rain getting in your garage door opener, and I had this plastic box over there, and we got another big wind out here, and that plastic ages, and next thing I know, I come out and the box is nowhere to be seen, and it rained all night, and the garage door opener is dead. Would not come back to life, so fix that with money. But I'm going to build a box that I can, like a wooden box or something over it, so that it will be shielded from the elements.
tell me, did you must have had some help lifting up the L500 and lifting up a telescope that, of course, you wouldn't want to drop.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I had to. I didn't show that picture. I had a friend come. We have like 4 astronomers in this valley that they chit chat over Facebook Messenger all the time, and I don't see any messages right now, but they're probably messaging about something. And I had them come over and help me. Basically, the L500 mount breaks into 2 pieces, so you can mount the first part that hangs on the wedge, but then the second one, no, that's right. The second one also has the aligning bolt or whatever, but it weighs still like 150 pounds. So I had 3 people lift that thing up, and I had 3 people help me put the telescope in place. The telescope's, I think, 95 pounds. And when they talk about how the stars are pinpoint stars in the field of view, it's true. To the best of my ability to know such things. I mean, I'm fighting that when I use the refractor sometimes to get the back focus right with the sensor and the focal reducer and all that. And you look at the edges, you can see the stars, but this PlaneWave image is just, it's just like everything they've been saying about it is true. I do like the fact that it's made in the USA. If I have a problem, I can talk to Bill.
Okay. Well, I think that, let's see, we usually ask if you showed a picture of a Facebook page that people could contact you if they needed to.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you're encouraged to go ahead and look at the comments. Somebody may make a comment in there in the YouTube comments.
I can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
This, of course, is meant to be my story, and by no means saying that, boy, I did it was right, but I've always enjoyed listening to people talk about how they did their setup, and you can always you always pick up some idea about that.
Some of our most popular shows are just people saying, well, then I did this and then I did that, and whoa, that didn't work, so I had to do this. Right. So yeah, it happens. We like those shows. And next week we're going to have people who have processed Eric Cole's data tell us how they processed it and how it all came out. And Brian just threw in a comment for the amp glow and the 183. You can remove it by using by good processing. Brian says you can get rid of most of that amp glow.
I've been able to do that. It amazes me that it's so bad to start out with.
Well, other than that, it's about time to say goodnight, isn't it? I think we've got everything covered. And don't forget, we do need further presenters. We've got a date in January and some February is coming up. And we like keeping ahead of them so that we don't have to worry about getting all that done. So please volunteer to tell your story, tell about your equipment, tell about your processing tricks and techniques that you've learned that are particularly good. All those things are quite useful to a lot of people. Don't think you have to know everything in the world just to tell your story. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who is in charge tonight. Thank you for streaming us out there to the YouTube, Tim. You're in charge. Take it away. Good night, everybody.
Dave, you can stay on.